Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this episode of the Modern Sales Mastery webinar. Please help me welcome our Chief Customer Officer of Vengreso. She comes with more than 30 years of sales experience. Help me welcome Priya Sachdev.
Hey, thank you, Felipe. Wow, so excited to be hosting today's webinar and delivering this to a global audience. So looking forward to interacting with all of you. Quick housekeeping before we get started. If you have questions, please at the bottom of your screens, add the questions to the Q&A or even to the chat. And I'm going to keep an eye out while we have the speakers talk to you on the topic. And also the fact that this is the first one for 2022. So as you start thinking about some of the points we're talking about, tell us which ones are most interesting for you. What you'll hear us talk about are key benefits of account-based selling. How can this strategy support your sales team in 2022? When and who should use account-based selling? And finally, what are the best practices for creating a winning account-based strategy? And I'm excited to introduce our speakers today, bringing in lots of experience into this session. We have Jaakko Paalanen. I hope I got that right, Jaakko, the Chief Revenue Officer for Leadfeeder. He believes in sales process where people and machine share the turf. And having a strong sales, marketing, and customer success alignment all aim towards building growth. Something that all of us would like to pick up from what we hear him talk about today. At Leadfeeder, they turn your unknown website visitors into sales leads, allowing salespeople to utilize marketing intelligence, being in the right place at the right time with the right content. And I can absolutely talk to that one because we use Leadfeeder ourselves. So welcome, Jaakko.
Thank you, Priya. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today. And welcome to Mario Martinez Jr., the CEO of Vengreso. So Mario is a known figure in the space of B2B sales and leadership, spent 96 consecutive quarters doing what he does best, right? And he's earned the #1 spot in the top 10 most influential business leaders by Beyond magazine. That cover was something to look out for, Mario. You look dapper in that one. Also selected as 20 sales influencers invited to appear in the Salesforce.com documentary film, The Story of Sales. Mario is the host for our popular podcast, the Modern Selling Podcast. So welcome, Mario, to the webinar today.
Priya and Jaakko, good to see you both. I'm excited to be here with all of you guys. Man, we have a worldwide audience. I think we have almost all 7 continents being represented. We're missing someone in Antarctica, so we've got 6 there. But pretty exciting to see such a global audience joining in for this particular webinar. And for all of you, unfortunately, out on LinkedIn, for some reason, we're not able to push this live. And so all of those LinkedIn folks are probably pretty disappointed right now. We're sorry. We'll get out the recording to you. So I apologize.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mario. And I feel like I'm in a time capsule because I'm already beaming in from the 21st of January and you're still there in the 20th, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So let's get started and let's talk about account-based selling. So before we get deeper into that, do you want to just talk about what is account-based selling? And Jaakko, would you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, sure. Would like to. I think if I think about account-based selling, it's like an inversion of inbound and like a leads-based sales methodology. So instead of targeting individuals and hoping that they have authority to buy, instead you target account first and foremost, and then you identify multiple stakeholders and decision makers to reach out from that account. So that's basically how I see account-based selling overall from my perspective.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Mario, your view on that?
Yeah, interesting. Out there in the world, we sometimes they refer to this as account-based marketing. We also refer to this as account-based selling. Some organizations see it totally different. In my view, it is different. And we have what's called account-based marketing. For all of you marketers, we could probably arm wrestle over this. And I'm sure all those that are focused on ABS can arm wrestle over this as well. So 6 dozen one, half dozen the other. However, in my view, I think there's a couple different unique scenarios. ABM is really focused in on working with marketing to provide some very specific focus on larger accounts that you're trying to penetrate. Those larger accounts usually have a lot of effort that's being put into from a marketing standpoint for ads and pay-per-click and gift marketing and those types of things. The account-based selling is actually a subset of that, in my view. And really, if you think about this, there is what marketing is going to do. Marketing will never, in my mind, serve 100% of the salesperson's needs. There's always going to be a need for salespeople to prospect. And if you do happen to have a marketing organization that is serving all of your needs, stay there, don't leave, milk the cow, and keep it going. But with that in mind, the account-based selling process is very similar, actually. You use a very similar mindset and methodology, and that is really looking at who are the target personas and companies that we want to go after, and focusing that into a very narrow, specific audience that is the sweet spot, the target sweet spot. So while marketing may be going after these big 800-pound gorillas or these nice accounts to have that have the total potential market of X dollars, that meets that criteria. The account-based selling is this piece right here, right? Where it's the sweet spot, and that we may not have enough funds to go after from an ABM perspective to put a ton of dollars and cents into that. And we as a sales organization say, here on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, yearly basis, whatever the methodology is, and we'll talk about that, these are the accounts that our sellers are going to do some prospecting on and focus in from an outbound perspective, right? We're going to look at multiple ways to penetrate this account, whether it's through referrals, whether it's direct outbound, whether it is through social media, as an example. And we're going to start targeting these individual accounts and these individual buyer personas. We do that very similarly here at Vengreso. We've got marketing that runs a focused target account-based marketing program. And then we've got 45 accounts every single month that we refresh and renew that our sellers in the local regions with their what we call market development managers are focusing on. And those accounts right there is generally what breeds the biggest amount or largest amount of meetings within our organization. So for me, ABS is a sub-program of ABM, but it is very much focused in on where the sweet spot that the sales leader sees that their outbound focus should be focused on.
Yeah. Well, I know that in the past, we've also referred to these as the must-win accounts. And that's a list that, kind of gets created. And it's always a great activity to do as you start your year. So I hope all our listeners are thinking about that right now. So tell us, who should be using account-based selling? Are there any guidance that you'd like to give us there?
Well, maybe if I go first, maybe if you flip around it and when you should maybe think twice if you should use account-based sales model, I think few consideration points could be that, first of all, if you only sell to small and medium-sized companies, maybe not a fit. In that scenario, you always need to look at the customer acquisition cost, what's the potential lifetime of the account, and make that ratio work. I see in many companies, it's usually 2-to-1, 3-to-1 ratio that the lifetime needs to be to the customer acquisition costs. Even in high growth SaaS companies, investors, for example, seems to look at more 5-to-1 ratio. But that's one observation from there. If your sales cycle is shorter than 3 months, maybe depending, again, like Mario said, in full account-based selling process, if there's not a lot of marketing spend on top, then might make sense to work also with a bit shorter sales cycles too. Obviously, if you're selling just a one-time purchase product, there's no lifetime in that, so wouldn't necessarily make sense in that part either. And also, if there's only one or a few stakeholders involved in the buying process, probably doesn't make sense. And as we know in B2B, there's multiple stakeholders involved, and that's why this account-based selling set is put in a place overall. And then I think for especially companies who are just starting out, if you don't have a product market fit yet, it might be hard for you to define that ideal customer profile, because you can't pull, for example, that data from your CRM out and look at the way what the characteristics of your current ideal or best customers are. So those would be maybe some notes that I would have. Maybe as a last one, good to think of, I guess, like Mario also noted this, that if you are thinking of utilizing account-based selling, it doesn't mean that your whole sales organization necessarily needs to be utilizing that. It can only be the sales operation that focuses, for example, on the enterprise companies, and your SMB sales force doesn't use that tactic. So those are some of the notes from my perspective.
Yeah, I'd like to expand on that and agree with what Jaakko's saying there. There's actually a couple caveats that I want to give, and I'll illustrate this. And for all the leaders that are out there, and even the sales reps, if you're joining as a sales rep, I hope you're taking copious notes, because these are things that you can literally go back and start executing on today without anybody else's involvement. And so a couple things to think about. Number one, let's talk a little bit about how we, Vengreso, do this. We sell to sales leaders and sales enablement leaders. That's who we sell to. And I think Leadfeeder is very similar market, along with the marketing organization is who they sell to as well. So when we look at our ABM strategy, we're looking at those that are in what we call the enterprise, companies that have 100 people or more. When we look at our ABS strategy, it's really those companies that have 15 to 100 sellers. That's that ABS category right there. In this ABS category, we're not doing any type of marketing that's being added on top of there. So marketing is not actually feeding into this ABS program that we've developed. And as such, we look at that and say anybody that has 15 sellers and below, we're not going to focus in on that. That's the Jaakko's comment about the SMB segment, right? It's highly transactional. Doesn't make sense to be focused in on the outbound from that perspective. But we can take elements of our account-based selling components and use them in the SMB. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about this a little bit later, and this is one of our secret weapons. And you saw that in the write-up talking about a secret that produces millions. In this ABS model, while marketing is not providing any type of gift marketing budget and or advertising budget, in the ABS model, we're very much utilizing a really cool functionality, and that's called ABP. All right, I'm not going to tell you what that is because I want you to stick around to the end. ABP, and you've never heard of it. It's account-based, and you fill in the blank, and it's not prospecting. All right, so hold that one. We'll come back to that one in just a little bit. But what we're doing there in this mid-market swath, if you would, is we are identifying the target companies using actually Leadfeeder. Leadfeeder is telling us that, hey, every single month, here are the companies that are on your website that are combing, and we're losing some analytics that tells us companies from this, I want to know all companies that have been on our website that have visited our website more than, say, 5 times. Okay. Now, Leadfeeder helps us identify that inside of our marketing automation system, in this case, HubSpot. It can be done across different platforms with Leadfeeder. And now our sales team says, well, rather than go cold prospect anybody, I'm going to try to find a company and target a company that actually has an interest potentially in our portfolio. We don't know who that person is, but likely it's either going to be someone in sales at the bottom or at the top, or someone in sales enablement, could possibly be marketing as well. So we start taking that and we peel off and we create our target list based upon that data. And some of those companies can be MQLs, and some of those companies marketing qualified leads, that is, and some of them can be brand new companies that we have really no presence of anybody inside the database. And then we have our BDRs, MDMs, we call them, our market development managers. They go and look for the target persona. And when they do that, now they start aligning who we want as our sweet spot to talk to. And then we start implementing on the account-based selling a 3-step prospecting process. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit and some of the other questions. So who can use this? is really focused in on the sales organization, developing a strategy to penetrate. And this can be used in that, definitely in that mid-market commercials, even in the globals accounts where there's not enough budget from the marketing side to fund going after some of these other accounts. That shouldn't stop a sales organization from penetrating and participating and getting participating companies to come to the table. So the answer of who, this is a sales focused function. Who else should be involved? At the very least, it should be the individual sales account person who's managing that territory. All the strategies that we're talking about today, you can implement on your own. But if you're a smart sales leader, you will do this and implement an entire process around this for your sales organization. And I'll talk more about what we've done here at Vengreso for ourselves that you can start mirroring as the example. Priya, back to you.
Thanks, Mario, for that. So I'm just thinking as I'm listening to you that what are the benefits you've seen of account-based selling? The fact that you spoke about that, Mario, and said you're using that at Vengreso. And do you want to quickly talk about some of the benefits or the advantages of using account-based selling with the audience today?
Sure. So I'll go first, Jaakko. So first off, there's this wrestling match that we have oftentimes between sales and marketing. Sales doesn't feel marketing is doing their job. Marketing says sales isn't doing their job. And we constantly have this wrestling going back and forth, even at the leadership level, right? The average tenure of a CMO, I think, is 22 months, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's 24. But the average tenure of a senior sales leader is 18 months to 20 months. My goodness, why, right? If one is failing, the other one is failing. That's the way it should be. You fire one, you fire both. Sorry, that's the way it should look. But let's not get fired. That's the goal, right? Let's hit our quota. So in answer to your question of what are some of the benefits, the benefits is that you've got to be able to develop a process around a prospecting strategy, both outbound as well as managing that inbound, in order for you to be able to turn that interest into a conversation, that conversation into pipeline, and then that pipeline into a closed won deal. Now, I didn't say anything to you that is nirvana. So let's talk about some of the benefits. The benefits is that you don't have to wait around for marketing to give you leads. The benefits you don't have to wait around for someone to say, what's your territory plan? And so when you implement this, you can have massive success. And for us, using this functionality of a component called ABP, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Again, I'm still teasing you out to keep everybody around. This functionality has produced millions of dollars for Vengreso alone, just by implementing something that was totally controlled by the sales organization. And then later, marketing started supporting. Yeah. So account-based planning, someone says, no, it's not account. So you find a great guest, though. Great guest. So the benefits you don't have to wait for anybody, whether you've got a marketing department or no marketing department, whether you've got funding or no funding, whether you've got support for marketing or not, you can implement these types of tactics and measures. The only thing that you really need inside of account-based selling process is content. And I can talk more about that in a little bit, but content is what feeds this engine, right? Valuable content that leads your buyer to your solution. It does not, we're not talking about content that is about product-based content. We're talking about value-based content. So those are some of the benefits that I've seen.
Yeah, I think really valid points. And I think excellent, accurate examples by how Vengreso is utilizing it, and also kudos for mentioning Leadfeeder there too. But I think a lot of the things for also for junior sales reps to keep in mind is the personalization piece, and what Mario mentioned was the content piece around it. And in ABS, obviously the core is to contact multiple stakeholders in the company. So I think one of the benefits there is obviously you are not tangled into just one stakeholder. If they say no, then the whole process ends when you operate with one lead process. I think that's one thing. The personalization you need to do overall in ABS processes helps with overall reply rates. And not only with reply rates, you get to adapt into a modern buyer journey sales KPIs, which is basically in B2B following the account sales model and the stages, how the account moves in the pipeline, and what is the engagement with the multiple stakeholders under the account. And I think that's also very related benefit for this process. So when you are doing these multiple stakeholder reach outs, kind of like the sub benefits in that, it's that first of all, it familiarizes all the stakeholders in different levels of the company about your product or service you're offering. You are fine tuning it for each individual so that it focuses only what each of those person value. And also it facilitates the conversation in across all of the levels. So that in mind, it just becomes much more powerful overall.
I am speaking on mute. Always happens. All right. So great points, Jaakko. And you kind of alluded to another point there, which was about mapping this. And I'm thinking mapping it to the buyer journey. So when you're talking about stakeholders and personalization, how important is it? And how do you do it? How do you align your account-based selling and map it to the buyer journey?
You want me to take that one first, Priya?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Maria. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So this question, Jaakko teed it up so perfectly, man. We could not have rehearsed this. This was perfect. So Jaakko mentioned something about personalization, and I see some of you putting in the chat account-based personalization. That actually is a really good one. No, it doesn't mean that, but it's a really good one, and we probably should use ABP for standing for two acronyms now, which is account-based personalization. So again, going back to real-world experience, our MDMs, market development managers, who are essentially account executives in training, they are selecting 45 target accounts to target POCs that they're going after. The sales leader, usually the VP of sales and above, and the sales enablement leader. That usually, depending on the sales enablement titles, it's usually a minimum of a director above. And it's all hand-to-hand combat. Let me repeat what I just said. It's all hand-to-hand combat. Okay, now you're probably saying to me, well, wait a minute, there's all these really amazing tools like SalesLoft, Outreach, VanillaSoft, Apollo, et cetera, that can allow us to be able to scale this at whatever level I want to go at. Yes, but here's the problem. You forget to be human. You forget to use your brain. Yeah. That's what these tools drive. And unless you're 100% committed as a sales manager to reviewing this on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis, no matter what the level is, from GAM all the way down to commercial account executive, unless you're 100% committed, then you got to go back to the good old-fashioned hand-to-hand combat. What do I mean by that? Well, if you think about one of the big challenges that's happening right now, email volume is up by 40.2 billion more emails. 40.2. Events, 1,000% up. Ad spend, 32%, and you name it. Everything is up on the digital format. So what's happening is we have a situation of an era of digital pollution. That's what we're faced with. That's what our buyers are faced with. So what we need to be thinking about when we think about aligning account-based selling with the buyer journey, we need to understand that the key to getting into someone's box is the hyper personalization. Tools like Leadfeeder, which we use and every day, help us figure out the target companies that we want to go after without going after someone cold. But it's the human-to-human engagement that helps us figure out what exactly did Jaakko publish this week? What exactly is happening in the news for that particular company? How do I hyper-personalize this message so this person knows that I know who they are? Sales leaders, if you want your sellers to be interesting, you have to teach them to be interested. Very important. Now, when you talk about the buyer's journey, our focus on this buyer's journey is understanding whether or not they have a problem that we can solve. And what I want you to do is one of your homework assignments is I want you to line up your sales team, line up your sales leaders if you're a vice president listening to this call. And I want you to ask your sales leaders or your sales team members, maybe it's your directors, maybe it's your managers, maybe your managers have their sales reps of 7 people, it doesn't matter. And you ask them one question and you say, what problem do we solve? One sentence answer. If your sellers or sales leader can't give in one sentence, just one, maybe 2, I'll give you 2, right? Give you grace. If they can't answer what business problem you solve, then you cannot align your selling process to the buyer's journey because you don't even understand what the business problem is that you solve. One sentence, not a product, not a benefit, one sentence of the business problem you solve. Example, we at Vengreso help sales leaders and sales teams create more sales conversations and grow the sales pipeline through digital sales prospecting training. Okay, if you're a sales leader and you have a problem creating meetings, then you'll be interested in talking to us. If you have a problem with pipeline, then you'll be interested in talking to us. If you don't have either one of those problems, I don't want to waste time with you. So this is what we mean by aligning to the buyer's journey, is understanding, do you have a problem? Can we actually solve that problem? If you don't have a problem, I don't want to talk to you and you don't want to talk to me. So we want to make sure that we align that messaging, and then comes all of the other messages that go along with it. Once you understand the problem, you align the messages. And I'll come back on another question and we'll talk about the 3 parts. We use an 18-step cadence on the outbound. We have 3 separate parts that we talk to align to the buyer's journey. And one of them includes ABP. Jaakko, back to you.
Excellent. Well put. Well, I guess I could take the side of the subject into the tracking part and understanding the buyer journey based on engagement and behavior, and the importance of utilizing that insight, because many salespeople still operate under, I think, with the blindfolds on, that they don't have any insights into the data or engagement or what the prospects are doing on the website. So once you have what Mario said, everything set up in that sort that you get it going, then it's about the tracking and seeing what they do, how they engage. And there is the 2 subjects is basically first party and third party intent data. That's really crucial for it. And first party data meaning what's happening on your own website, what Mario mentioned about Leadfeeder, for example, and then the third party signals about news, everything else that's happening related to your target accounts, and being alert on those. And I think this is still very underutilized section for sales processes and by salespeople still on this day. And I think from my perspective, we get a lot of questions from salespeople that how do we go from an account level sales signal to, like, who do we contact then? And this is again understanding the buyer journey and the decision makers and the stakeholders, and understanding what they are looking for. So if somebody from an account X is showing multiple signals of that they are searching something you are offering, you need to be aware of that and then utilize that insights again in a personalized manner, like Mario said, understanding what problems they have and how can you solve that. And that's how, from my perspective, on top of what Mario said, you can align with the buyer journey.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for some of those points. I think those are really critical. I think one thing we are all talking about and being more aware about is the humanizing of sales. And honestly, I've been in sales for 30 years, never thought there'll be a day where we are talking about that to salespeople. But here we are. So, how do you create a targeted account list? Jaakko, you spoke about some of the data points there. And do you have any best practices or tips to share with the salespeople if they want to now do account-based selling? What's the starting point?
Well, I think the starting point again is understanding your ideal customer profile, and if you have done selling already and your company has done, you have existing clients, then that's the data point you're going to utilize to get that data in. Like, what are their firmographics, technographics, what kind of characteristics to those best customers you currently have, and then pull that data, lookalike audiences from that, finding similar companies. That can be easily the first starting point. Then And obviously, how do you create this? You then need a database for that, and there's plenty of these available. I guess in the US market, there's Apollo and Zoom Info and such. So you need first the understanding of the ICP and defining it clearly, so that the whole sales organization understands what are the exact characteristics of that, and you can go as detailed as possible with the data we have available today. You can do multiple deep dive searches. So the more targeted, the better. But I would start from understanding what's your current best client profile and finding lookalike audiences from that and utilizing that as a starting point for building that target account list.
Yeah, and Priya, with that in mind, everything that Jaakko just said, and then let me talk to the tools component. Once you understand that, now you take a tool like Leadfeeder, which is what we use to identify the targeted companies and then match them up to the persona. So making sure the company persona we're going after. Then our reps turn around and they utilize that company and they use LinkedIn Sales Navigator to find those individuals. Once we've identified them, we put them on a target account list for the month of whatever it might be, December, January, February, you name it. And then we turn around and we have a data enrichment team that goes into that Sales Navigator list and uses Seamless.ai, which is a competitor to Zoom Info and some of the other ones that are out there that actually finds the information. And we synchronize it back into our CRM, which in this case, we use HubSpot. So between those four tools that I just mentioned, we also have another tool that we utilize, and that is for synchronizing our LinkedIn messages back with a customer back into our CRM. And there's two tools that are out there. One's called Linked Hub, which is specifically for HubSpot, and the other one is called Leadjet.io, and that allows you to be able to synchronize back into Pipedrive, HubSpot, Salesforce, etc., directly from LinkedIn, even if you don't have LinkedIn Sales Navigator.
Yeah, thanks. And we're talking about so much of the sales tech stack there, right? And how technology is becoming so important in the way we set this up. So let's talk a little more about best practices in terms of creating an account-based strategy. What are some of the things that you would highlight there? What should we be keeping in mind as we start thinking about this?
Yeah, if I can start,
Sure.
perhaps one like checklist I have for this or building the framework is like a 6-step process. So first, you need to get internal alignment for this. I'm really happy to hear how hardly Mario, for example, is talking about the ABS, and I'm sure the salespeople in your organization are fully committed to this, and there's internal alignment for this, but it needs to come all the way from the leadership to understand that this process is going to work and everybody stands behind it. After the alignment is reached, you again create that ideal customer profile that we just discussed about. And then after that, the subset, the buyer persona. So who are the key stakeholders? What do they look like? Defining those, and what are the messages, personalizations for these individuals. Then it's about defining that whole strategy behind it. How does the cadencing model work? What are the touch points? What is the overall strategy? And that obviously always needs a bit of a testing when you start. And when you do testing, you obviously need tracking. So you need to have campaign analysis and everything ongoing. So you would get to the success rate as quickly as possible. I think we are really heavy on data-driven sales processes, and that usually comes first, that we also set clear targets first, that what are we trying to aim with this? What does success look like? And then based on that, we can iterate, and there needs to be a feedback loop overall to then iterate on the overall strategy, and that sort of a motion you run month to month and tailor it all the time better and better, and that's how I sort of see the best practice framework. But Mario, how do you look at this?
Yeah, we're coming up here on time, so I'm going to try to be brief or talk super fast, but there'll be a recording. So if I'm talking too fast, I know I got that comment. You can come back to it. Trust me, it's okay. So in terms of best practice for creating a winning account-based selling strategy, a couple of things that you want to be thinking about. First, if you're utilizing a tool that is giving you insights like Leadfeeder or any Bumble or any of those types of things, Taduz, I think if I'm pronounced your name correctly, put into the chat, into the Q&A, hey, we've used these types of tools before, but it just gave us way too much traffic. I want to go back to something that Jaakko said a second ago, and that is you need to understand who are the target companies and profiles that you're going after. For example, on Leadfeeder, I have a minimum of 500 new companies that I can go after every single month. Minimum 500. There's no way that I'm going to go after 500 with a team of 6 people, right? That just doesn't make sense. So we narrowly focus that in using the CRM to say, give me only companies that meet this criteria with this criteria, this size company, this number of salespeople. And once we do that, now we have a list of whatever it might be, 100 that we are going after. So that's what I want to encourage you to do in terms of designing a strategy for best practices. The second thing is about the prospecting. And this goes back to the cadence. I told you, I tell you what ABP stands for. If you look at our 18-step process, which is all hand-to-hand combat done through task automation in our CRM, the first 7 steps that we go through, from looking at getting a referral request to the email, the first call, the first video message, the first connection request, those types of things right there, that first 7 steps is all focused in on hooking the buyer with the buyer pain point and adding value. So as an example, if I were to reach out to Jaakko, a CRO, I would say most CROs that we speak to have 2 common problems. 1, they want to be able to book more meetings. And number 2, they need to grow the sales pipeline. Are either of these 2 challenges for you? If so, I've attached an article that talks about 2 things you can do right now that can accelerate the pipeline without any additional budget. Now, if Jaakko has that problem, he's gonna be like, okay, well, let me take a look at this article and see if there's value, right? So now that is that value, that personalization with that value to the individual buyer persona. So that's steps 1 through 7. The third best practice is taking the cadence and now saying, okay, steps 8 through 12, I'm going to focus in on hooking the buyer by exposing a problem. Now, in our case, we can see a sales organization that we approach, and we can see how many sellers are actually active through social media. And we can see your individual profiles and see how good or bad those profiles are, and if you're attracting or distracting or detracting your target buyer. And we've literally won deals by sending an example, a profile to a CMO that said, we don't need any help whatsoever. I replied back with, really? Is this skull and crossbones on top of the LinkedIn profile for your 2-year account executive, the brand that you want to represent? And he said, touche, let's have a conversation. So we have a way to be able to expose that problem. And not everybody can do this, but you want to be thinking about ways to expose that particular problem. And then step 3. Step 3 is, if nothing works in between the first step, steps 1 through 7, that's part 1 that I was talking about. And then the second part, which is expose the problem. If I don't get a response by that 12th touch point, now we move into touch points 13 through 18, which is the part 3. And that is, we now look to hook that buyer using ABP. What is ABP? Account-based podcasting. So someone got that early on, account-based podcasting. And guess what? Most individual leaders want to have their thought leadership demonstrated. And I kid you not, for a sales budget, if you have $1,200 a month, you could email me to today, and I'll give you a connection that will help produce 4 shows a month, one a week, $1,200 to $1,500 a month. If you can find that budget, I'd pay for it out of my own pocket if I were to do this. You start a podcast and you create an outreach campaign on that last 13 to 18 steps of the prospecting campaign that's focused on, hey, Mr. or Mrs. CRO or CSO or CIO or CTO or C whatever it might be. I was talking to our CEO, who is the host of the popular podcast called, and he asked for any recommendations, and I immediately thought of you. Would you be open to sharing your thought leadership on this podcast? And we have a 50% response rate. That is a secret weapon right there. And if you are anybody worth anything in sales, I would absolutely pay for it out of my own pocket if marketing wouldn't pay for it. Go and march into your sales leader's office, say, hey, I need $1,500 a month to start a podcast and bring these folks in. And you will start getting conversations and have your sales leader or chief technology officer or CIO, somebody in your suite, be the host. And now you build that executive relationship. And we've closed millions of dollars off of just this last hook. And so that's what I would say as a best practice is separate your cadence into 3 separate parts. First part, buyer pain point. Second part, expose the problem. And if none of those work, then the last part, which is steps 13 through 18, is ask them to demonstrate thought leadership. And that's the ABP.
Perfect. And we finally do know what ABP stands for there. So some great points coming out of that discussion. And we've also spoken about some tools we use and some strategies. Do you guys now want to just kind of summarize this together or talk about 1 or 2 key highlights before we're almost on time as well? We kind of round this up. And maybe I'll check by then if we have any questions that we can answer to as well while you summarize this. So a few parting thoughts.
Yeah, I think it was around the last question of setting up the whole framework and tracking the performance throughout the whole cadence and all the steps and understanding the ICP, the buyer persona, being personalized, and then testing, measuring, and making the loop go round and round. I think that's the overview of the account-based selling. And obviously without having the marketing, account-based marketing association there, if it's fully sales people and sales staff costs, you can do it very cost effectively. I think that was a great point Mario made too, that again, we can still maybe ignore the SMB section, but mid-market without marketing support definitely could make sense and work from the numbers perspective too. So I think those would be the highlights from my perspective. So yeah.
Sure.
From my perspective, Jaakko loved what he said. I would say have a process in place. Have a plan, understand your buyer persona, your company persona, be laser targeted, have a process, and then you need some tools. So those things can work. And then when you think about your own individual prospecting, as I mentioned, that prospecting cadence, 3 parts, 18 steps. We have a great article that really covers this, and I'll drop it into the chat. It's all about prospecting. It's about a 15-minute long read. So I'll throw that in the chat for you guys to take a look at, and you can click on it. And this covers ton of this information on that campaign very specifically, and it's in the chat now. And if you actually can't, if you're watching this on recording, just type the word prospecting into Google and we're on page number 1, somewhere between position number 1 and 5, and look for Vengreso.
Yeah, or reach out to us. I can't but not make a pitch there.
There we go. Or reach out.
Just reach out to us and we'll get that to you. All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for all that great insights and talking about account-based strategy. I do hope that our audience today is able to take back their notes and start building this into their 2022 strategy as they do their planning and AOP meetings, which I'm sure everybody's already got under their belt, right? So thank you so much for that. And we will be making this recording available for all the people who have joined us, and the ones who just missed it will be able to access this recording as well. So thanks for that.